Picture this. One of the most powerful women in media, Oprah Winfrey, known for getting even the most tight-lipped celebrities to spill their secrets, reaches out with what could be the olive branch of the decade. She extends a discreet personal offer to Princess Catherine, not just a friendly chat, a televised primetime soul-bearing exclusive, a chance to finally set the record straight, to reclaim the narrative after years of silence and savage online abuse. The moment had the potential to rewrite history. But what happened next stunned even royal insiders. Prince William, typically composed and diplomatic, stepped in, and what he delivered wasn't just a no, it was a thunderclap. A royal rejection so fierce, so deliberate, it echoed across tabloids, Twitter threads, and Buckingham Palace corridors alike. According to insiders, William's message was clear and brutal. "It's too late. My wife has no interest in dredging this up again. She's endured enough since your deceitful sit-down with Meghan Markle. No royal will ever accept another exclusive from you." Rejected, not quietly, not politely, but with the force of a man who's had enough. Enough of the lies, enough of the spin, and definitely enough of Oprah. It wasn't just a declined interview, it was a stand, a public rebuke wrapped in private fury. And for those who've been following the royal saga since that infamous 2021 interview, this moment felt like the snapping of a thread that's been fraying for years. William didn't just shut the door, he bolted it, threw away the key, and nailed a message to it in bold print. You don't get to rewrite this story. And here's what makes this moment so seismic. The world has long known William as the restrained one, the stable brother, the future king who plays by the book. But this was different. This was personal. For once, he wasn't just protecting the monarchy, he was protecting his wife. And that made all the difference. What led to this explosive rejection? What were the stakes, the wounds, the betrayals buried beneath the surface of that single devastating statement? And most of all, why now? Because this wasn't just about Oprah. It was about Catherine, about what she endured, about the cyberbullying that ripped through social media like wildfire, about the silence she held through illness, scrutiny, and whispers so loud they drowned out her own voice. This refusal wasn't a soundbite, it was a scream. But that's just the beginning, because to understand why William's words hit like a thunderbolt, we have to go back to where it all began. To truly grasp the magnitude of Prince William's rejection, we have to rewind to the night the foundations of the monarchy began to crack under the weight of a televised bombshell. It was March 2021. Millions around the world were glued to their screens. The teasers alone had promised an emotional reckoning. But what came next was far more explosive than anyone expected. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle sat down with Oprah Winfrey in what was billed as a no-holds-barred tell-all. And tell all they did. From mental health struggles to racism, from betrayal to abandonment, nothing was off limits. For the first time, a senior royal, one born into the institution, spoke out in devastating detail about what life behind palace gates really looked like. Meghan, poised but visibly wounded, opened up about how she was left to suffer in silence, how she felt isolated, unprotected, and at times so lost that she admitted to battling dark thoughts she couldn't control. And when she said, "I just didn't want to be alive anymore," the world paused. It was raw, it was real, and it was horrifying. Harry backed her with calm conviction, revealing how their pleas for help were allegedly ignored, how security was stripped, and how their family ties were left dangling by a thread. But it wasn't just the emotion that shocked people, it was the allegations. One of the most damning moments came when Meghan recounted conversations within the royal family about how dark Archie's skin might be when he's born. The implication was monstrous. That race in the 21st century might still shape acceptance within the crown. Harry later clarified it was a single conversation, early on, and not with the Queen or Prince Philip. But the damage was already done. The air was thick with the word racism, and the public backlash came swiftly, particularly against William and Catherine. Another story sent shockwaves through the palace, the infamous Flower Girl incident. Initial press reports had claimed Meghan made Catherine cry before the royal wedding. But in front of Oprah, Meghan flipped the script. The reverse happened, she said. According to her, it was Catherine who had reduced her to tears, and later apologized. Meghan emphasized that she had forgiven her, even adding that Catherine had brought her flowers as a peace offering. But that revelation wasn't just a plot twist. It painted a new dynamic. It suggested that even those who were seen as graceful and untouchable, like Catherine, had skeletons lurking in their royal closets. Then there was the depiction of royal life itself. Meghan spoke of having her keys, driver's license, and passport taken, suggesting she had been imprisoned in plain sight. She likened herself to a bird trapped in a golden cage. Harry compared her suffering to Princess Diana's tragic story, evoking sympathy but also suspicion. It felt, to some, like a carefully orchestrated retelling of history, with Meghan cast as the new Diana, and the monarchy once again painted as the villain. But here's where things get complicated. In the days, weeks, and months that followed, cracks began to form. Not in the palace, but in the story. Fact checks rolled in. Sources close to the royal household began leaking contradictions. It was clarified that royal passports are typically held by staff for security reasons, not as a method of control. Meghan's own half-sister released photos showing they'd been in touch for years, despite claims of estrangement. And whispers began to surface. Had some parts of the story been massaged to fit a narrative? What became clear was this: the Oprah interview wasn't just an emotional exposé. It was a seismic PR move, one that redefined how the world viewed the monarchy. And the ripple effect was brutal. Social media turned into a battleground. Supporters and skeptics of Meghan clashed in endless comment wars. Hashtags were born and weaponized. Catherine was pulled into the fray, compared, critiqued, and crucified by those who had only one side of the story. She didn't respond, but her silence, far from neutral, became a canvas for public speculation. For William and Catherine, this wasn't just a media moment. It was a turning point, a moment of rupture where their reputations, built over a decade of steady, dutiful appearances, were suddenly dragged into a global firestorm they had no control over. And for William, it wasn't just about public image, it was personal, because the brother he once trusted had taken a match to the family and let it burn on live television. But the cost of that fire was still to come, and no one would feel it more than Catherine. What happened next wasn't just heartbreaking, it was brutal. In the wake of that explosive Oprah interview, a media wildfire ignited, and at its center stood a woman who hadn't spoken a single word. Princess Catherine, long celebrated for her composure and restraint, suddenly found herself thrust into the harshest glare of public scrutiny. But this time, it wasn't the tabloids dissecting her fashion choices or praising her charity work. It was something far uglier, unrelenting, and deeply personal. Almost overnight, Catherine became a lightning rod for online vitriol. The moment Meghan painted her as the aggressor in the Flower Girl incident, social media picked sides. And in the court of public opinion, Catherine became the villain in a story she never chose to be part of. Hashtags like WannaSchmeenKate and Crygate began trending. Comment sections are filled with accusations of racism, coldness, and cruelty. Suddenly, she wasn't just the Duchess of Cambridge. She was the scapegoat. And what made it worse? Catherine said nothing. She didn't respond with a televised rebuttal. She didn't issue a carefully worded statement through palace spokespeople. She did what she had always done: smiled in public, served her duties, and carried on. But behind the palace walls, insiders say the toll was immense. Those close to her reveal that the months following the Oprah interview were some of the hardest of her life. Not because of the public attacks. Catherine had grown used to the press spinning narratives. But because of the relentless online abuse, because of the silence that had been weaponized against her, and because of the twisted irony that while Meghan was praised for speaking her truth, Catherine was demonized for not speaking at all. And it didn't stop there. The scrutiny followed her into every corner of her life. Speculation about her marriage ran wild. Claims that she and William were putting on a facade, that she was unhappy, that she was being silenced by royal protocol. Twitter threads dissected her body language at public events. YouTubers created hour-long exposés based on 5-second clips. It wasn't just criticism, it was obsession. Then came 2024. Catherine, known for her unwavering public presence, suddenly withdrew from the spotlight. Her absence sparked a storm of conspiracy theories. Was she sick? Was she leaving the family? Was there trouble behind the gates of Kensington Palace? The truth, as it would later emerge, was heartbreaking. Catherine had been diagnosed with cancer. Even as she faced a brutal health battle, the trolling didn't stop. In fact, it intensified. Conspiracies morphed into cruel speculation. Some accused her of faking illness to avoid royal duties. Others claimed her silence was proof of guilt. The same social media platforms that once praised Meghan for being vulnerable now punish Catherine for being private. Prince William, who had stayed largely silent since the 2021 interview, could no longer ignore the damage. Though he didn't name names, his carefully worded public statements began to carry an unmistakable edge. He spoke of the need for kindness, dignity, and truth. He called out the dangers of online hate. He pleaded for privacy, not just for his wife, but for their children. While the world dissected every frame of Catherine's public appearances, George, Charlotte, and Louis were watching their mother struggle to shield them from the storm. Catherine, ever the poised royal, didn't crumble in public. But those close to her say the pain was real. The betrayal, especially from a family member, cut deep. The Oprah interview didn't just tarnish her image, it changed how the world saw her. It allowed strangers to cast judgment, to rewrite her story without knowing the woman behind the headlines. And here's the harshest truth of all. Catherine never had the platform Meghan did. She didn't sit on a bench in Oprah's California garden. She didn't get to tell her side with cameras rolling and a sympathetic interviewer nodding along. Her silence wasn't weakness, it was survival. It was grace under fire. But it also came at a cost. The cyberbullying, the false narratives, the emotional whiplash of watching the world fall for a story that, to her, felt twisted and incomplete. It all added up. And still, she remained silent. So when Oprah reached out with an offer in 2025, an exclusive chance to finally speak, to finally clear the air, many thought Catherine might take it, that she might use the platform to reclaim her truth. But what the public didn't know was that the wounds hadn't healed. And one man, her husband, wasn't willing to let her relive that pain. Because behind every silent, Catherine was a furious William, waiting for his moment to strike back. And that moment was about to come. To the outside world, Prince William had always been the picture of composure, the future king, the level-headed one, the brother who stayed behind to carry the crown while Harry chased freedom. For years, he upheld the monarchy's golden rule. Never complain, never explain. But after the Oprah interview detonated in 2021, something inside William began to crack. Because for the first time in his life, the institution he was born to protect couldn't shield the people he loved most, not even his wife. Insiders revealed that in the days leading up to the Oprah special, William was visibly shaken. He knew it was coming. He had heard the rumblings. He had seen the press releases. But nothing could have prepared him for the actual broadcast. The moment he heard Meghan accuse unnamed royals of racism, his heart stopped. Then came the revelation about Catherine and the flower girl dress. And by the time the segment ended, with Harry echoing the pain of Princess Diana and drawing painful parallels to Meghan's suffering, William was done. According to palace aides, he barely ate for days. He paced. He lost sleep. He stopped speaking to key members of his staff because he knew that what the world had just witnessed wasn't just an interview, it was a weapon. And the first person it hit wasn't him. It was Catherine. That was the first time William reportedly lashed out behind closed doors. Not at Meghan or Harry, but at the institution that had allowed this to happen. He was furious the palace hadn't been more proactive, hadn't prepared a defense, hadn't done anything to protect Catherine from the fallout. And worse, he was furious that his own brother, his flesh and blood, had gone global with accusations that left his wife to be ripped apart by strangers. This wasn't just family drama anymore. This was betrayal. Over the following months, William's demeanor shifted. He still showed up at royal engagements, still shook hands and smiled. But those close to him noticed a sharpness in his tone, a coldness in his eyes when questions about Harry surfaced. He wasn't the bridge builder anymore. That job, he felt, had ended the night Oprah's special aired. The line between brothers had been crossed and burned. But William didn't go to war with words, not immediately. He bided his time. He poured his energy into Catherine's recovery after her cancer diagnosis, focused on his children, and ramped up his public work, especially around mental health. Projects like Heads Together and Shout became more than pet causes. They became outlets for his rage, for his mission, for his message, that online hate destroys lives, that silence isn't peace, and that truth matters more than optics. Behind the scenes, though, William was done playing nice. One source close to the palace said William had drawn a line after the 2021 interview, a line that couldn't be uncrossed. While King Charles pushed for diplomatic neutrality and palace aides whispered about healing, William stood firm. He refused to attend certain events if Harry and Meghan were present. He demanded the media stop pitting the two couples against each other in headlines. And when leaks from Montecito kept surfacing in the press about texts, riffs, and private conversations, William reportedly exploded in private. He believed, rightly or wrongly, that he and Catherine were under attack, not just from trolls, but from family. So when Oprah resurfaced in 2025 with her infamous olive branch, it wasn't just poor timing, it was gasoline on a long smoldering fire. To many, Oprah's offer seemed like a golden opportunity, a chance for Catherine to speak her truth, correct the record, and reclaim her public image. But to William, it was an insult, a delayed gesture that arrived years too late, after the damage had already been done. And worse, it came from the very person who had given the original accusations a global megaphone. William saw it for what it was, an attempt to clean up a mess that should never have been made in the first place, a PR move disguised as compassion. That was his breaking point. After years of holding his tongue, of watching Catherine suffer in silence, of standing in the debris of a fractured family, William unleashed what palace insiders are calling his most unfiltered response to date. He didn't go through advisors. He didn't draft a statement with Buckingham's approval. He took control of the narrative himself. And what he said wasn't carefully calculated, it was raw. It's too late. My wife doesn't want to do interviews. She doesn't want to speak about you. She's already been cyberbullied to hell and back since your sit down with Meghan. No royal will ever accept another exclusive from you. This wasn't diplomacy. It was war. And the message was clear. Catherine didn't owe Oprah anything, and William was done letting others speak for them. For years, he had swallowed his anger, had played the peacemaker, had watched his wife be torn apart while keeping a stiff upper lip. But now, he was through being the nice guy. This wasn't just a rejection. It was a reckoning. And for the first time, William wasn't protecting the crown. He was protecting Catherine, and that made him unstoppable. In the years since the world stopped to watch Meghan and Harry's 2021 sit-down with Oprah, the ripple effects haven't just lingered, they've intensified. Friendships fractured, institutions shook, reputations crumbled. And while Meghan and Harry took their story global, building a brand on their version of events, Oprah Winfrey walked away with a glittering media triumph, at least for a while. But now, behind Hollywood's velvet curtains and inside private circles of influence, whispers have begun to swirl. Whispers that the queen of interviews, Oprah herself, isn't as sure of that conversation as she once was. Whispers that what was once a ratings goldmine might have been a miscalculation of devastating proportions. At first, the signs were subtle. A soft hesitation when the topic of Harry and Meghan came up in interviews. A lack of follow-up specials. A surprising silence in the face of newer developments, contradicting claims made during that infamous night. And then, the real bombshell. Insider reports emerging from media circles in Los Angeles suggesting that Oprah, behind closed doors, had expressed regret not just about the fallout, but about whether she had been told the full truth to begin with. According to those close to her, Oprah has started reflecting deeply on the impact of that interview, not just on the royal family, but on her own legacy. And that's no small thing. Because for Oprah, every conversation she hosts is meant to be a sacred exchange, a moment of emotional truth, a platform for healing and clarity. But when the stories begin to unravel, when inconsistencies surface and counter-narratives gain momentum, that sacred trust is at risk. One Hollywood executive put it bluntly, Oprah doesn't like being played. If she feels even a hint of manipulation, it haunts her. And in this case, there are signs that she's feeling just that. Let's talk about the details. The passport claim that Meghan had hers taken away and felt imprisoned has since been debunked by multiple sources who clarified that royals often don't carry personal documents due to protocol and security. Meghan's claim of being an only child with no relationship to her half-siblings, photographs, emails, and even her father's public letters suggest otherwise. The story about making Catherine cry was turned upside down. But even then, palace insiders contested Meghan's version, describing a much more complex and emotional scenario. None of these contradictions alone would shake a seasoned interviewer, but stacked together, they start to paint a picture, not of a malicious lie, but of a one-sided narrative. A narrative that Oprah presented to the world without hard pushback, without receipts, and without balance. That, say insiders, is what she now regrets most. Even more telling is Oprah's track record. This isn't the first time she's circled back to question her own role in shaping cultural conversations. In 2024, she issued a formal apology for her role in popularizing toxic diet culture during the 90s and 2000s. She admitted to creating unrealistic standards and acknowledged that wheeling a wagon of fat onto her show was more harmful than empowering. It was a rare moment of introspection, one that earned her both criticism and praise. And now it appears that the same level of reflection is happening again. Multiple entertainment insiders claim that Oprah has privately discussed her concerns about how the Meghan and Harry interview aged. According to one source, she has said that while she believes Meghan's pain was real, she now questions the framing of certain claims and the lack of response from the royal family, which, by protocol, couldn't legally or culturally defend itself in the same theatrical format. But here's where the plot thickens. Some unconfirmed but persistent reports have suggested that Oprah went further, that she may have offered a private apology, either directly or through intermediaries, to Princess Catherine, not for conducting the interview itself, but for the tidal wave of cruelty and bullying that followed it. Videos have surfaced online claiming to show Oprah admitting on air that the full picture hadn't been clear, though none have been independently verified. Still, the internet doesn't need proof. The narrative has already caught fire. Social media has latched onto the idea of Oprah's remorse, with viral threads alleging that she feels responsible for the public vilification of Catherine during her most vulnerable years. Others say she's scrambling to salvage her relationship with the palace, not just out of guilt, but out of necessity. Because in the media, perception is everything, and Oprah's brand has always been built on empathy, not division. Some believe this is what led to her decision to extend that now infamous interview offer to Catherine in 2025. Not just as a journalist seeking balance, but as a woman seeking redemption, a do-over, a chance to give Catherine the platform she never had, and in doing so, cleanse her own conscience in front of the world. But if that's true, it's clear she gravely miscalculated, because what she received in return wasn't gratitude or reconciliation. It was fire from a future king who had reached his limit. Still, Oprah's regret, real or rumored, adds a deeply human layer to this saga. It reminds us that media giants, even the most powerful ones, are not immune to consequences. that even the most well-intentioned interviews can spark unintended chaos, and that in the age of digital receipts and viral backlash, every choice is etched in public memory. Whether Oprah's remorse is sincere or strategic remains to be seen. But one thing's for sure, her olive branch came far too late. And what happened next would make royal history. In the ever-evolving world of royal media maneuvering, timing is everything. And in 2025, when the storm seemed to have finally quieted, Oprah Winfrey resurfaced with what looked, on the surface, like a peace offering. A private, carefully worded invitation. No cameras yet, no press leaks. Just an outreach through discreet channels, offering Princess Catherine something she had never been given, the chance to speak. But this wasn't just any interview. This was Oprah. Again, the same woman who had lit the fuse back in 2021. The same woman whose stage had served as the launchpad for one of the most divisive royal media events in modern history. This time, however, the story would be different. This time, the narrative would be Catherine's to shape. The offer came quietly, almost cautiously. There was no formal announcement, no PR teaser to stir up hype. Insiders say it was made through intermediaries, carefully avoiding official palace gatekeepers. And that alone spoke volumes. Oprah knew this wasn't a door she could knock on twice. She knew Catherine had spent the last few years battling in silence, not only against illness, but against the tidal wave of hate that followed the 2021 interview. So this outreach had to be delicate, and more importantly, convincing. The pitch, according to sources familiar with the situation, was framed as empowering. An exclusive conversation where Catherine could set the record straight, not to retaliate, but to restore balance. Oprah's team reportedly emphasized that the platform would be respectful, controlled, and safe. There would be no ambush questions, no manipulative edits, no emotionally weaponized sound bites. Just Catherine, in her own words, finally tells her side. On paper, it was a tempting proposition. Millions would tune in. The public's appetite for Catherine's perspective was insatiable. Supporters believed she had been misrepresented for years, and even skeptics wanted to hear her speak for herself. Ratings would soar. Narratives would shift. Sympathy, clarity, and closure could all be served in one elegant sit-down. This could have been Catherine's moment. But beneath the surface, the risk was immense. For starters, agreeing to such an interview would mean reopening old wounds on a massive scale. It would mean dredging up accusations, dissecting claims, revisiting Meghan's interview, and effectively putting Catherine in direct opposition to her in-laws again. It would thrust her back into the center of a media maelstrom, just as she was beginning to reclaim her privacy and rebuild her health. And for a woman who had weathered one of the most emotionally devastating years of her life in the public eye, that was no small thing. Then there was the optics. No matter how controlled the interview might be, appearing on Oprah's platform would be interpreted as a statement. Headlines would write themselves. Catherine breaks silence on Meghan feud. Future Queen slams Oprah interview claims. William and Catherine fire back. The world would seize on every word, every facial expression, every pause. And suddenly, Catherine wouldn't just be sharing her story. She'd be dragged back into the very war she'd spent years trying to leave behind. But perhaps the biggest gamble of all was trust. Because accepting Oprah's offer would mean trusting that the very person who once gave Meghan a megaphone wouldn't use this moment to spin another narrative. Even if Oprah's regret was genuine, even if she truly wanted to make amends, the stakes were far too high. Catherine wasn't a Hollywood star with a press tour to promote. She was a mother, a future queen, a woman who had already suffered the fallout of one interview she never agreed to. And she wasn't about to risk going through that again. Still, there were palace aides who reportedly considered the opportunity. Some believed that the world had evolved, that Catherine's voice was now more powerful than ever, and that using it could mark a turning point in how the monarchy engages with modern media. Others saw it as a trap cloaked in empathy, a clever PR stunt designed to rescue Oprah's credibility, while putting Catherine back on the defensive. Even among the public, the reaction was divided. On one side were royal fans who desperately wanted Catherine to speak, to vindicate herself and call out the hypocrisy. On the other hand, there were those who feared the backlash would only reignite online hate and worsen the family rift. And somewhere in between stood William and Catherine, evaluating, measuring, weighing every angle with the precision of two people who knew that a single misstep could alter public perception forever. In the end, it came down to principle. Catherine had survived the storm without ever trading insults or seeking revenge. Her silence, though criticized, had become her power. And speaking now, under the banner of the same media platform that once caused so much destruction, risked undermining everything she had endured with grace. That's when Prince William stepped in. And make no mistake, what followed wasn't a quiet pass. It was a thundering, unambiguous rejection. A rejection that didn't just decline the interview, it condemned it. And in doing so, William turned a private conversation into a public reckoning. Because while Oprah extended her hand, she forgot one thing. Catherine doesn't need a platform to be heard, and William wasn't about to let her become the palace's sacrificial offering. Not again. The stage was set, and William's fury was about to erupt with words that would rattle royal protocol and Oprah's empire like never before. The world never expected Prince William to be the one to drop the hammer. For years, he had been the royal family's stoic center, the polished heir, the unflappable diplomat, the calm one to Harry's more fiery persona. But in 2025, as whispers of Oprah's outreach to Princess Catherine surfaced, something inside William finally snapped. What he delivered wasn't a denial laced with palace politeness, it was a verbal thunderclap. A raw, personal, no-holds-barred rejection that left no room for doubt. According to insiders close to Kensington Palace, the response came not through official press releases or filtered royal channels, but directly from William himself. No speechwriters, no PR gloss, no Buckingham approvals, just a husband, a father, and a future king who had reached the edge. His words, relayed through multiple sources, were explosive. "It's too late. My wife wants nothing to do with Oprah. She has endured years of cyberbullying and media harassment since that deceitful sit-down with Meghan Markle. This family has suffered enough. No royal will ever give Oprah another exclusive. Period." There was no softening, no diplomatic cushioning, just fire. And for royal watchers, it marked a turning point. This wasn't the William we'd grown accustomed to, the one who walked 2 steps behind Queen Elizabeth in measured silence. This was the William who had stood outside a school in 2021, shaking with rage as he told reporters, "We are very much not a racist family." That moment had been a rare flash of defiance. But this was a declaration of war on the media machine that had relentlessly hounded his wife. Let's be clear, this wasn't just about declining an interview. It was a reckoning, a retaliation, a roar from a man who had stood by as his wife was torn to shreds online, compared unfavorably in tabloids, and turned into a living meme by armchair critics who knew nothing about her. William's rejection wasn't just for Oprah, it was for every journalist, every influencer, every troll who used the 2021 interview as a blueprint to attack Catherine. And what made it even more powerful was that it came after years of strategic silence. William had watched the public buy into half-truths and one-sided narratives. He had seen his wife suffer in elegant silence, never once firing back, even as conspiracy theories about her health, her marriage, and her character went viral. He had seen her go through a cancer diagnosis under the weight of internet hysteria, with strangers claiming she had disappeared, divorced, or worse. And now, with Catherine finally reclaiming a sense of normalcy, Oprah's invitation felt like a trigger, a disruption, a reopening of a wound that had just started to scab over. Insiders say William's fury was personal, but also deeply calculated. This wasn't an emotional outburst. It was a clear, strategic message sent across the media world. The royals are no longer playing by your rules. For decades, the monarchy had danced an uncomfortable tango with the press, giving just enough access to keep public opinion afloat, while swallowing indignities behind closed doors. But William's statement broke that cycle. It was a middle finger to the expectation that the royals must forgive, forget, and entertain for public consumption. And most notably, it wasn't made on behalf of the crown. It was made as a man protecting his wife. That distinction matters, because when William referred to Oprah's 2021 special as a deceitful sit-down, he was invoking the language of betrayal, not miscommunication, not unfortunate framing, deceit. And that word wasn't chosen lightly. It echoed the frustrations of royal loyalists who had, for years, pointed to inconsistencies in Meghan and Harry's claims, the passport, the flower girl story, the accusations of racism without names, the "I felt trapped" narrative juxtaposed against lavish trips and global interviews. William, without naming names, dismantled the entire house of cards with one phrase. And yet, in that same statement, there was no gloating, no smugness, just finality. No royal will ever give Oprah another exclusive. That's not just a door closed. That's a palace gate slammed shut and welded for good. The implications were massive. For Oprah, it signaled the first true black mark on her storied interview career. Her sit-down with Harry and Meghan had won awards, headlines, and applause. But now it was also being called the catalyst for years of hate and division, by the future King of England, no less. For Meghan and Harry, it was another rupture in an already burned bridge. William's words made it clear. Forgiveness hadn't arrived. If anything, time had hardened his stance. And for Catherine, it was the shield she had never asked for, but desperately needed. William's public defense wasn't just about setting boundaries. It was about rewriting the narrative. Catherine wasn't the cold duchess, the distant royal, or the silent shadow. She was a survivor of reputational assault, and William was drawing a line so thick the world had no choice but to take notice. What followed was a media explosion. Headlines dissected every word. Commentators debated whether William had gone too far, or just far enough. Some praised him for standing up to media giants. Others accused him of being too aggressive, too personal. But one thing was certain, the rules had changed. Because in one unforgettable rejection, William had reminded the world that not even Oprah Winfrey gets a second chance at rewriting royal pain. And this time, it wasn't the institution speaking. It was a husband, a father, and a man who had nothing left to lose. Prince William's thunderous rejection of Oprah's offer wasn't just a headline, it was a paradigm shift. With that single statement, the future king did something revolutionary. He rewrote the terms of engagement between the monarchy and the media, setting the stage for a full-blown war of narratives. This wasn't just about protecting Catherine or punishing Oprah. It was about dismantling the media's long-standing monopoly over royal storytelling and asserting control in an age where perception is everything and truth is dangerously subjective. For centuries, the British royal family played a delicate game with the press. They offered access in exchange for protection. They withheld personal emotions and scandals in return for curated headlines and favorable photo ops. But that old world shattered the moment Harry and Meghan aired their grievances on Oprah's couch in 2021. The monarchy was no longer dealing with reporters armed with notepads and deadlines. They were up against weaponized storytelling, viral social media cycles, and emotional narratives built for maximum impact. And worst of all, they had no voice in the room when it happened. That imbalance is what William's rejection begins to correct. His statement was more than a personal defense. It was a battle cry, a warning shot, a line in the sand. No royal will ever give Oprah another exclusive. Translation? We will no longer play by your rules. We will no longer serve ourselves up for your ratings. We will no longer allow the crown to be used as a backdrop for someone else's drama. This hard pivot isn't just emotional, it's strategic. William and Catherine, now positioned as the future of the monarchy, are crafting a new blueprint for royal engagement, one that favors digital control, curated messaging, and direct communication with the public over third-party filters. Notice the trend? Increasingly, the couple uses their own channels, like Kensington Palace's official Instagram or tightly scripted video messages, to speak to the people directly. No media spin, no out-of-context quotes, just controlled, deliberate messaging with crystal-clear optics. Compare that with the chaos that followed the Oprah interview. Meghan and Harry's dramatic revelations were raw, unscripted, and emotionally explosive, but also vulnerable to fact checks and backlash. In the weeks following the interview, inconsistencies surfaced. Public opinion shifted. Even some of Oprah's supporters began to question whether the special had gone too far, too fast, with too little pushback. William saw all of that unfold, and he learned. He watched as his wife, despite never speaking publicly, became a central figure in a narrative she had no part in shaping. He saw the headlines weaponized against her, the YouTube exposés, the TikTok conspiracies, the Twitter threads dissecting her every expression. He saw what happens when the royals give the media a story and trust them to tell it with integrity. And he decided, never again. The rejection of Oprah also sends a powerful message to future media moguls. The monarchy isn't your playground. Gone are the days when the crown would be used to boost ratings or turn personal trauma into viral content. This new royal generation has no interest in being relatable if it means being exploited. And the public? Surprisingly, they're on board. Recent polls show a significant increase in support for William and Catherine, especially among younger demographics disillusioned with fame for fame and sake culture. In a world oversaturated with influencers and trauma-bait content, their silence has started to read not as weakness, but as strength, as elegance, as dignity. In contrast to the oversharing that dominates modern celebrity, Catherine's reserved approach to public life feels refreshing, regal even. And William's firm stand only solidifies that image. He's not just a future king, he's a man with boundaries. In the age of constant access, that's rare and powerful. But this isn't just about how the royals interact with the media. It's about how they control their own mythology moving forward. By shutting down Oprah, William has made it clear that the monarchy's story will no longer be told by outsiders with cameras and scripts. It will be told by insiders who understand the weight of silence, the cost of scandal, and the power of restraint. This new approach could ripple far beyond the palace gates. Already, other high-profile public figures are taking notes. Celebrities, CEOs, and influencers have started pulling back from traditional press in favor of controlled releases and direct-to-audience content. The Waleses may be leading the charge in a larger cultural shift, a rejection of media sensationalism in favor of authenticity and long-term reputation. Of course, not everyone agrees with William's hardline stance. Critics argue that rejecting Oprah was a missed opportunity, that Catherine could have reintroduced herself to the world on her own terms, humanized her side of the story, and possibly built bridges with those who had turned against her. But that assumes Catherine wants to be reintroduced, that she owes the world an explanation. William's response says otherwise, loudly. And therein lies the tension that defines this new war of narratives. The media wants stories. The monarchy wants silence. The media wants vulnerability. The monarchy wants control. The media wants a confession. But the royals? They want redemption on their own terms. The question now isn't whether this war will continue, it's who will win. Will the media evolve and seek accountability for the damage it causes? Will the royals stick to this new, guarded philosophy long enough to reset expectations? Or will another scandal crack open the fortress they've so carefully built? What's clear is this: the monarchy is no longer playing defense. They've gone on the offensive. And in this battle for public trust, the game has just changed. Forever. After years of relentless headlines, whispers, accusations, and online storms, the royal family, spearheaded by Prince William, has made one thing clear. The era of quietly absorbing blows for the sake of tradition is over. The crown has drawn a line in the sand, and that line is permanent. William's fiery rejection of Oprah's interview offer wasn't just a moment of emotional retaliation. It was the culmination of years of bruises, betrayals, and a media landscape that has grown increasingly predatory. This wasn't diplomacy. This wasn't never complain, never explain. This was a seismic shift, a thunderous declaration that the old rules have changed, and the monarchy is no longer afraid to say no. For Princess Catherine, it meant more than protection. It meant finally being seen, not as a symbol of quiet endurance, but as someone worth defending, worth drawing blood for. She never asked for a stage, never needed one. Her silence, which critics once twisted into weakness, has now become her shield, her armor, and her power. In a world obsessed with oversharing and sensationalism, she became the royal who didn't flinch, who didn't feed the fire. And that silence, in the end, spoke louder than any interview ever could. And William? He's no longer just the bridge between tradition and modernity. He's the architect of a new monarchy, one that refuses to play the media's game, one that doesn't apologize for setting boundaries, one that protects its members, not just with polished statements, but with real action. Because this was never just about Oprah. It was about what Oprah's original interview represented. A turning point where emotion overtook evidence, where the most explosive version of the truth won, and where reputations, particularly Catherine's, were left to burn for the sake of someone else's redemption arc. Now, in 2025, the royals are taking their story back, and the world is watching. This moment is about more than rejecting a sit-down. It's about rejecting a system where scandal sells, where silence is misinterpreted as guilt, and where reputations can be rewritten in a single broadcast. It's about refusing to play the pawn in someone else's ratings war. It's about drawing a line, not just for Catherine, but for future generations of royals, and anyone else in the public eye who has ever felt bulldozed by media opportunism. And what happens now? That's the question hanging in the air. Will Oprah respond publicly? Will she double down or disappear? Will Harry and Meghan weigh in or remain silent as their already fragile ties to the monarchy continue to fray? And most importantly, will the media finally take responsibility for the scars it leaves behind in the pursuit of viral soundbites? Whatever happens next, one thing is certain. The royal family is no longer the quiet punching bag of public discourse. They are choosing silence with strength, privacy with purpose. And when pushed to the edge, they're pushing back. Prince William's stance wasn't just a defense of his wife. It was a defense of truth, a warning shot to the media world, and a signal to the public that the monarchy may be evolving. But it's not rolling over. The line has been drawn, and the crown will not be moved.